Hey, everybody, welcome to Muscle Science for Women. I'm one of your hosts, Ashleigh Van Houten. Thank you for being here. I wanted to do this quick solo episode before I head out for Costa Rica. I'll be gone for a month. We may or may not be recording while I'm there, but I just wanted to get this one done and out to you guys because we've had a couple emails, a couple questions about this topic, and I wanted to do sort of just a general 101 about this topic so that you can become a bit more informed and also just have some jumping off points for further learning and maybe asking your doctor about what we're talking about today is iron. What is it? What does it do in the body? Why do we need it? Why do women have specific iron requirements and how do those change throughout our life? How can we optimize our iron? What symptoms might tell us that we're having some issues with iron? What's the difference between low iron and anemia? What are some of the things that we should be looking out for specifically if we're getting our iron tested? All of these questions, because it is a very, very common deficiency, as we'll get into, and it can really impact not only your training, but everyday life and quality of life. And it's something that you may not look to immediately, right? Like this may just kind of get swept under the rug a little bit, which is surprising considering how often it is an issue. But I wanted to give just sort of a general overview. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm not a doctor and I am not an expert in blood testing. So use this information, with a grain of salt. Take anything that comes from this and take it to your healthcare provider, your naturopath, your doctor. But like I said, I hope that this is sort of going to provide you with some basic understanding. And then also, if you have further questions, you'll at least maybe have a bit better sense of what questions to ask, right? So before I kind of get into it, just a reminder that Muscle Science for Women is on all of the places you listen to podcasts. You're listening to it right now, but have you taken the time to subscribe, leave a message, leave a comment, rate, review? That means a lot to us. This is a free podcast and we want it to continue to be free and we want it to continue to be successful. So we need your help and your engagement with it. We'd really, really appreciate that. We also have a Substack now, which is where we're going to be talking about some different things that may not make it onto the podcast. And maybe it's just a bit more of a thoughtful platform than social media. So we're excited to pour some thoughts out over there, and we hope that you check it out. You can subscribe to us on Substack for free. You can also pay and get stuff that other people don't. But that's up to you. So the link is in the show notes. We also have a Muscle Science for Women YouTube channel, not just the Rachel and Ashleigh separate YouTube channels. And we're going to be putting some specific content on there this year as well. We've got a lot of things brewing for 2026. So we're pretty excited, but we want you to come along and help us and engage and talk to us and give us your feedback. So you can do it on all of those platforms. You can also email us at musclescienceforwomen@gmail.com. That's the number 4. Or you can reach out to us on social media and just say hi and maybe tell us what you want from us in 2026. Is there a program you're really wanting that we haven't made yet? Is there a topic you want us to talk about? This is why we're talking about iron today, because we had a couple people reach out and say, hey, what's the deal with iron? So here we go. Without further ado. So what is iron? It's a trace mineral. It is very important. Like many trace minerals, it's something that does a lot in our bodies and it just kind of hums along in the background and we sort of take it for granted how much it's doing. And then when it stops helping us because we're deficient or we're not absorbing it or what have you, it can cause a lot of problems. And we don't, again, necessarily directly go to, okay, we're iron deficient. So this is why this information is important. Iron is essential for things like oxygen transport. So it's a key component of hemoglobin, which carries oxygen from your lungs to your muscles and your brain. So that's pretty important. Iron is essential for energy production. It's involved in mitochondrial function. It's essential for muscle performance. So it supports myoglobin, which stores oxygen inside muscle cells. It's necessary for cognitive function and mood. And it's essential for immune health. So again, basically everything. And it impacts everything when you aren't getting enough. And we're going to talk about symptoms, but often iron deficiency feels like there are symptoms that are very common to other issues too, but it feels like if you feel like you're doing everything right and just suddenly everything is an effort and you're like dragging yourself to go anywhere or do anything, like you get to get up and go up the stairs to go take a shower and you're just like, oh my God. And this isn't normally what you're about, maybe iron is involved. So women have special iron requirements, of course. We are unlike men in a lot of ways, and this relates to iron specifically because during our reproductive years, we have a period and we bleed every month, and there's a lot of iron in blood. And so we're losing iron every month when we're bleeding. Whether you have a quote unquote normal period, irregular, whatever, you're losing blood that needs to be replaced. We have very high iron requirements and thus very, very common iron deficiencies in pregnancy and postpartum, even more so sometimes in postpartum than pregnancy. Building a child, it turns out, massively, massively increases your iron requirements, and breastfeeding as well. And then even the event of giving birth, which often involves a lot of blood loss. And a lot of women, because we don't necessarily know this or are not paying attention to it, or for other reasons, we aren't actually ever replenishing the iron that we're losing during this period. So that's really crucial. And we'll speak to it a little bit more in a bit. Another reason why we have maybe different requirements is actually because we have different dietary patterns. Now, I know a lot of the women listening to this podcast may be a specific group that is not typical. I think a lot of you probably do eat quite a bit of animal protein, red meat, but in general, women tend to eat less of this. We eat less food in general than men, certainly less red meat. We tend to follow more high plant-forward diets. There is iron in plant foods, but it's much less bioavailable and usually in lower amounts. So all of this taken together, and then on top of that, we're bleeding. On top of that, we're maybe getting pregnant and giving birth. We're training hard, all of these things. It can really drastically reduce our ability to get iron in the first place and absorb it. And lastly, this isn't really anything different for women, but training stress can impact iron turnover. So if you're strength training a lot, if you're endurance training, if you have just high volume exercise, you're going to have higher iron requirements. So these are all reasons why we maybe tend to have more issues with iron deficiency than men do. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about why our iron needs change across the lifespan. So I did kind of briefly go over that in our reproductive years. That is the highest risk phase for iron deficiency because, again, we're menstruating, maybe we're training. Culturally, typically, that tends to be a period where we're under fueling. You know, everybody kind of, a lot of women, I'm not going to say everybody, a lot of women have their story of when they, ate 1,200 calories a day for a couple of months to try and get skinny or whatever it is. We tend to do that sort of in our younger years, our reproductive years before we figure it out. So all of these things together in our 20s, 30s, early 40s, it's depleting iron stores, and it can happen year over year without us even really realizing it. Now, there are a lot of numbers if you kind of do the research, and they vary widely. And I don't think it's necessary for those of us listening to this podcast to like memorize or latch on to any particular percentage. But just so you get kind of an idea, there are some studies that show that, anywhere 36 to 40% of women can be iron deficient during this time. And when you become pregnant, it can shoot up to over 80%. It's actually extremely common and actually the exception to the rule to not be iron deficient by the end of a pregnancy. And I can speak to this personally, having had 2 pregnancies. I eat a lot of red meat, as you guys know. That's kind of my thing. I eat a lot of organ meat, which is very, very nutrient dense and high in iron. And I'm, generally pretty on top of my nutrition. And I don't know if I think I was okay in my first pregnancy. But again, second, you're kind of coming back depleted in every way, no matter how hard you try, because you're older and tired and you have a kid already. By the end of my second pregnancy, I was not clinically problematically low, but my iron had both my stored and circulating, we'll get to that, iron had dropped from high, great, wonderful levels to like, oh, you are just on the line to this being a problem. And my midwife had told me, you're not in a danger zone yet, but you're riding close to it. And if you're breastfeeding, you're going to give birth, all of these things, you have to really be on top of this. You have to really pay attention to it. I did end up supplementing with iron. I'm going to talk about supplementing a little bit in a bit. I did supplement with intention. So this isn't something you kind of want to just blanket, start popping iron pills, but I had to. And so the moral of the story is that you may think, oh, well, I'm a pretty healthy person and I'm pretty on top of things and I eat a very nutrient dense kind of whole foods, protein forward diet. You may still need some help. Maybe not, but don't think you're safe maybe because you eat super healthy, and don't think you're conversely failing if you do eat a really healthy diet and you're still losing iron during this phase, because it's just so common because your iron needs are so intense during that time. So again, over 80% of pregnant women, and I know some people personally who were anemic during this time, who were getting blood transfusions, who were having major problems with low iron. So it can run the gamut during this time. And this isn't to scare you. It's just to say this is a time when you really want to be mindful and paying attention to this specific trace mineral because it's important. So in perimenopause, your iron needs may fluctuate. And as we know, in perimenopause, it is a time of just fluctuation in general. Your periods are coming and going. They may be heavier. They may be more irregular. There's all kinds of things kind of going on during this period. And so you may have a temporary increase of iron loss if your periods are heavier. Maybe not. It's just something to kind of consider during perimenopause that you may likely this may still be an issue for you, but it won't be as maybe clear and straightforward as in previous iterations of your life when you were having maybe a regular period. Now, interestingly, something to pay attention to is that when you're postmenopausal, once your menstruation stops for good, obviously it follows that your iron needs are going to drop significantly as well because you aren't bleeding and losing iron at the rate that you have been before. In this period, iron stores can often rise and sometimes harmfully. And so this is why I had kind of alluded to earlier that the sort of blanket statement of like, just take an iron pill just in case is not good advice, because too much iron is also harmful. I'm not going to get into kind of specifics of supplementation here, but we all know that there are some kind of supplements, vitamins and minerals out there that really the worst that could happen is if you're taking too much of it, you kind of pee it out. Maybe you're wasting some money, but it's not going to be damaging to your health. That is not the case with iron. You don't want to have too little and you don't want to have too much. So this is why it is important. Again, not trying to be fear-mongering here, but why you want to pay attention to this and why if you are experiencing symptoms or you are in a specific period of your life, you want to get these things tested. If you're somebody who's regularly getting blood work and getting tested anyway, these are just things you want to pay attention to, because you don't want to have too much iron or too little. And you can potentially have iron stores go up in a way that could be problematic in menopause. Excuse me, had to take a sip. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about iron terms, just words, medical jargon that you may be seeing on blood work that will help you read it. And I know it's not your job to read a lab test, but just this little bit of information can maybe help you ask the question. So if you, and this is a very common circumstance for a lot of people who will maybe ask for blood work, get their blood work back, and maybe there's things missing that could be helpful. Or maybe it's the classic case of the doctor saying, well, everything looks pretty normal. But if you know a little bit more about what you're looking at, you could say, well, okay, well, maybe this looks normal, but XYZ isn't listed here, or this is looking a little bit, maybe there's something here we could look into. Do you see what I mean? It's worth kind of just taking that extra step to understand what these terms mean. So if you're getting a blood work, iron blood test taken, you're going to see some words like ferritin. You've probably heard of that. It's stored iron. Ferritin is stored iron. So you want to think of this as like your reserves, right? So low ferritin means that your reserves are low. So if you have another term, we're going to learn about hemoglobin. This is the red blood cell oxygen carrying capacity. So if your hemoglobin is normal, you could still have low ferritin, and that is problematic. So again, they could come back and say, well, look, your red blood cells are working fine. You've got enough iron in your blood that it's taking the oxygen where it needs to go. That's okay. But if they haven't looked at your ferritin, there could still be a reason why you feel like crap and you don't know it, right? So another thing you may see is serum iron. This is the iron that's circulating in your blood the day that the test is taken. This fluctuates a lot. It doesn't necessarily tell us much. So again, that's something where if it looks okay, that doesn't necessarily mean things are okay. You've also got something called transferrin saturation, TSAT. This tells us how much iron is being transported to the tissues. So if you get a low number on this one, TSAT, this is like we're bordering into anemia territory, which we're going to talk about. And then again, I mentioned hemoglobin. This is the red blood cell oxygen carrying capacity. So this is what most people are going to be looking at. Like, are your red blood cells working? But by the time this is low, you probably have been experiencing iron deficiency for a while. So this is sort of like the canary in the coal mine, but you really do want to be paying attention to that and ferritin. Okay. Now we also want to talk about how much iron you want to be ingesting and taking in. And we need to talk a little bit here about the difference between RDA, so the recommended daily, versus optimal. And this is it seems like it becomes very divisive when we talk about, things like RDA for protein amounts, for example, right? So you hear a lot that the RDA for protein is, what is it, maybe 1 gram or half a gram per kilogram? I don't know, some low amount that's basically people surviving on 40 to 50 grams of protein a day. Where if you listen to a lot of health and fitness podcasts, they're going to tell you to aim closer to 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass, which could be the difference for the average woman of 50 grams of protein per day and maybe somewhere closer to 150 grams of protein a day, around there, right? There's a big difference there. And while you don't have to be nailing the number every time, the difference that we're talking about here is the RDA is what you need for survival, what your body needs to clinically function. And the optimal amount, which is always going to be a bit more, is to help you thrive, be healthy, perform, build actual muscle tissue onto your body, which we all know is a very tricky thing to do. And just to use another example to kind of get rid of it's so ridiculous how kind of provocative this conversation is. And people saying, the RDA is the golden standard. Anything else is just ridiculous. And health influencers trying to sell you something. Let's talk about water for a second. There's probably an RDA for water for the average person. If you look at what someone's height and weight is, you could have, a couple ounces of water a day to survive. You can survive on that for sure. But if you want to exercise and breastfeed and not have a headache and have proper digestion and thrive in your life, you're going to need a lot more than a couple ounces a day, right? That should not be revolutionary to anybody, and it should not be controversial to anybody. So the same can be said for protein, and again, bringing it back, the same can be said for iron. So the RDA for iron in premenopausal women right now, generally speaking, if you look online, is about 18 milligrams per day. But we want more than that. And so to go back to what the levels are going to show in your testing, we find that generally when ferritin, so you remember that's the stored iron, is lower than 30 nanograms per milliliter, people are having issues, they're having symptoms. Most women are going to feel better at 50 to 100 nanograms per milliliter. This is not prescriptive. It's just what shows in the research that, again, you can survive on a certain amount. So going back to the RDA in milligrams in terms of intake, premenopausal around 18 milligrams. Some studies might indicate that if you're active, if you're exercising, you may want to be on the upper end of that, somewhere closer to 20 to 30 milligrams. For pregnant women, it's recommended to be closer to the 30 milligram amount. And then when we get back to menopause, it drops right back down to anywhere from like 8 to 12 milligrams. But this is a wide range. And this is where you want to really speak to a trusted health advisor, because again, we don't want to be maximally dosing iron and just saying more is better, because in this case, more is not always better. But minimal RDA is not always optimal either. So it's a bit of a delicate topic, but it's something that is worth discussing and talking to your doctor about. So some special considerations for strength training women, because that's who you are. That's why you're here. You do need probably more iron when you are training hard, because muscle tissue uses iron for oxygen storage. Red blood cell turnover increases, and things like sweating and, just heavy lifting is going to contribute to more iron loss and more iron requirements. And so we're going to talk a little bit about symptoms now, because often it will show up in the gym before it shows up in real life. When it shows up in real life, you may be even a little bit more advanced and a little bit more in trouble. Symptoms to watch out for is if everything feels hard in the gym, and you know the difference between I'm going to the gym and I'm a little tired today, I'm not really feeling it, versus what is happening. Like I'm doing a warm up and it feels like I can't even finish this warm up. I'm getting on a treadmill and I'm just like can barely do it. Your strength is stalling, it's plateauing, maybe it's decreasing, recovery's taking forever. It just feels disproportionately difficult in a way that is not normal. You may want to look at iron. And okay, so here's another thing we want to talk about is how low iron and anemia are not the same thing. Oftentimes you might just hear kind of in general terms them used sort of interchangeably. They're not the same thing. Low iron means that your iron stores are depleted. Anemia means your red blood cell count or your hemoglobin is low. So this is a progression in your iron shortage. It's gone so far that your body cannot make the healthy red blood cells that it needs to deliver oxygen throughout your body. So oxygen delivery is dropping, and that's when you're really going to have some very noticeable, very intense symptoms. You can have low iron. You can have tests come back showing low iron and not have anemia, and many women do. So this is where you want to catch these things before it gets to the anemia stage. Low iron is, your gas tank is getting a little low. Anemia is like it's empty and you're stalled on the side of the road. So by the time anemia shows up, you may have been iron deficient for months or even years, which is why testing is important. So going back to some of the symptoms, this is just low iron. You do not have to be anemic to feel things like low energy, brain fog, poor mood, your performance is dragging, shortness of breath during workouts that you did not used to feel that way, just decreased tolerance to exercise, things like cold hands and feet, hair shedding, brittle nails, dizziness when you stand up really quickly, restless legs is another one, low motivation. So again, a lot of these symptoms are things that could be the result of many things like poor night's sleep, bad nutrition, poor recovery, all of those things. But if you're feeling like a lot of these things and they're not normal for you, and you feel like everything else is kind of in line and you're like, this feels like it's coming out of nowhere, this could be a real indication. Your body isn't responding the way it wants to because it can't, because of this thing that's missing. So some of the things that change when low iron is progressing into anemia is it just kind of accelerates and everything is just more intense. So you're feeling extreme fatigue, like you're getting up off the couch and going up the stairs and you're like out of breath. Maybe you're noticing you're more pale, really short of breath, rapid heart rate, headaches, feeling lightheaded all the time because you're not getting enough oxygen to where it needs to go. So this can be a pretty dangerous and really negatively impactful state. You really don't want to get there. And a lot of times busy women athletes are going to miss these signs because we are used to pushing through discomfort. We're used to just being tired and not feeling great and doing it anyway. And so this is where, I urge you to listen to your body, listen to yourself. You know inside the difference between, I'm a mom or whatever, maybe I work hard and I didn't get great sleep last night and I'm tired, versus something really doesn't feel right. because these symptoms are going to kind of creep up, and they may be like, oh, I can just kind of push through it now. They'll do that until they suddenly can't, and you're in a real problem state. So you just need to pay attention. This isn't you being weak. This is physiology that is really, it's your body's telling you something, and you should listen. So here are some lifestyle and nutrition strategies to optimize iron. You want to prioritize iron sources that are really bioavailable. And guess where they are? Red meat and poultry and seafood. So this is heme iron that's found in animal products. They're absorbed much more efficiently than plant iron. You don't need to eat huge amounts. Again, I'm not going to get prescriptive here. You don't have to eat 12 ounces of liver a day to get the right amount of iron, but consistent animal product inclusion in your diet is going to be really beneficial here. So having some animal protein every day is going to be a big help, a big start in the right direction. You also want to consider pairing your iron sources with vitamin C, because this really dramatically increases the absorption, specifically of non-heme iron, which is what comes from plant foods. So if you're eating things like, I don't know, spinach, lentils, things like that, that have iron, they're plant-based iron sources, you want to pair them with things like citrus or peppers and vegetables, foods that have vitamin C. And conversely, you want to try to avoid pairing your iron foods with inhibitors like, unfortunately, coffee, tea, rich sources of calcium, and dairy. So again, if you're having your steak and eggs in the morning with a giant coffee loaded with cream, you may be kind of just inhibiting your body's ability to make good use of the iron in those foods. So you just want to think about maybe spacing it out, maybe just not eating them together. Again, the details of, I don't have the answer for you in terms of like, do you have to wait an hour between eating to have your coffee? But you maybe just want to be mindful of these things if you are experiencing these issues. Just think about your food combinations. And of course, you need to train smart, fuel properly. And this is something we talk about with Muscle Science for Women in every situation. It doesn't have to relate to iron at all. If you are chronically underfueling, if you're not eating enough for your body's processes and for the training that you're doing, it's going to become a problem with iron deficiency and with a host of other issues if you're not eating enough. So you need to recover properly and you need to eat properly. So a couple, again, takeaways is that when you are getting testing, you want to look at both your hemoglobin and your ferritin. You want to make sure that the stored iron is good, as well as the circulating iron in your red blood cells. Don't self-supplement without labs, without speaking to a professional, because it can be problematic if you have too much iron in your system. You can iron overload and it can be bad. And another takeaway is that if you are pregnant, wanting to become pregnant, if you are postpartum, you probably need a lot more iron than you're used to. So you may need to, again, talk to your doctor, load up on things like red meat and animal products, and just make sure you're eating enough and fueling properly. Because again, this can be a long-term thing. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen after like a week of not eating right. It happens over months and months and years, and not replenishing and fueling properly. So that's about it. I hope that this was helpful. Again, this is sort of just the tip of the iceberg. This is just sort of the basic nuts and bolts of the thing, but I hope that this provided some information for you. And you can kind of take some, if this brought up any questions for you, you can take those questions to your doctor when you're getting your labs. And maybe, just to start with, you can look back through your diet and your training and how you feel, and see if any of this is resonating with you. Like, see if this feels like, maybe this is something that I need to look into, or I'm in this period of my life and maybe this is why I'm not feeling so great. It's just something to think about. So that's it. I hope it was helpful, and I hope you enjoy your week. Thank you so much for listening and for being here. And I'll catch you on the flip side when I get back from Costa Rica. Till then, don't do stupid shit. Don't be insane. From Rachel and I both, we love you. We'll see you next week.